Okay, it's time, so I think we might start again. So we're going to look at 5 different proofs for the existence of the self, and we'll start with the argument from agency. And I'll read it out to you, and then you can tell me what you think of it. So it's on page 200 on the right-hand side, column 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth new paragraph, as from the motion of the chariot. That's where it begins. As from the motion of the chariot, we infer the existence of an intelligent guiding agent in the shape of the charioteer, so also we infer an intelligent guiding agent from the body, for the body, from the activity and the cessation of activity appearing in the body, which have the capacity of acquiring the desirable and avoiding the undesirable object. So start with the analogy of the chariot. You can think about the analogy of a car. You see a car on the road making intelligent moves, at times stopping at red lights, avoiding, big potholes. If you're especially in India, you have to drive around potholes because some of them might be so big. Avoiding potholes, avoiding collisions, not just blindly going to the left or the right. Again, in India, there's no concept of lanes. From this intelligent movement of the car, you can think there must be an intelligent agent guiding the body. Now, these poor Nayayikas weren't thinking of the cars. They weren't even thinking, they were thinking of chariots. But even if you think of a driverless Google cars, that are available today, there is still an intelligent system in there, lots of intelligent sensors, lots of sense organs, if you like, taking in the information, synthesizing it, and responding. There's an intelligent system, there's a computer inside the driverless car. So, of course, these Nayayikas weren't thinking of that, but they're thinking of the self as the intelligent agent guiding the body, because we don't see bodies moving around us aimlessly. Bodies move towards things that are that we desire and move away from things that we find undesirable, right? From the intelligent action of the body, we can infer an agent that is guiding the body, an intelligent agent that is guiding the body. And they give you some examples, and what I want you to think about is whether the examples help to make the case. So the paragraph just below it. The intelligent agent is also inferred from the actions of breathing. You gave an example of actions of breathing. They think that's also intelligent action. And how? When we perceive a variegated functioning of the air contained in the body, we infer the existence of a guiding agent who would act like a blower of a windpipe. From the regular action of winking up and down, we infer the existence of the agent who would be like the puller of a pulley. From the fact of wounds of the body being healed up, we infer the existence of an agent who would be like the master of a house, repairing it. From the action of the mind towards the contact of the sense organs, apprehending desirable objects, we infer the existence of an agent who would be like a boy in a corner of the house, aiming a ball at something. We see our sense organs being directed to things that we find desirable. So let's just stop at these 4 analogies. Breathing, winking up and down is like puller of the pulley, wounds of the body, healing, and just the fact that our sense organs are pulled towards, so we see things that are desirable, look away from things that are not desirable. What do you think? Are these good analogies? Do they suggest an intelligent agent? Do we think of breathing as something that requires an intelligent agent? Do we think of winking? We think of all of these actions, of the body healing. When you get serious trauma in some part of the body, you get a bruise, and there's nothing much you can do about the bruise except rest it, and then the body heals itself. Do these feel like intelligent actions? Would you think of them as intelligent actions? Should there be an intelligent agent guiding, doing the guiding behind the scenes, like the charioteer?
I think they are intelligent actions, but intelligence is the same level as plants, right? So if you're going to need a soul to do these things, plants are going to need a soul as well.
Well, plants do have a soul. According to these guys, that's fine. You know, they're moving towards the sun. The plants grow in the direction where they can get a bit of sun. I have too much trouble taming some of the plants at home because no matter which direction I would like them to grow, they will grow in the direction of the sun. And they're going to exactly say, that's the soul doing the guiding, you know, towards things that are desirable. Sunlight is desirable to a plant. So you might think it's a bad idea, but these guys aren't going to think that's a bad idea. So they're going to say every action, which, you know, sounds counterintuitive because we just used breathing as an example of something which does not, so we were thinking of it as an involuntary action. According to these guys, no action is involuntary, and that, you know, makes their case for why you need an agent. Agency is an essential property of the body, essential property of the self. It has to be there all the time because nothing, you know, it's, if you like, the prime mover and the shaker, the doer. Let's look at the other analogies and see what they have to say. So I've read the first four. When we see an object by the eye and then recalling the taste of that object, we find a certain modification appearing in the organ of the taste. From this, we infer the existence of a single guiding agent for the two operations, like a person looking through two windows. Now, this is getting more serious. The reason why this is getting more serious is what you get here is synthesizing cognitions. This is not just a single action. They're talking about, you know, when you see something by the eye and you recall something. When you see a mango and recall its taste, then a desire arises in the body. So there is some synthesis going on. Synthesis of cognitions is going on. And for that, we need a self. This is a very important point of debate between the Hindus and the Buddhists. The Buddhists, you know, because they think of momentary selves, have a huge problem explaining memory. These Hindus don't have that as an issue. We'll see whether the Buddhists can explain this or not next week. But the idea is that synthesis of cognitions, just by seeing a mango, you can recall its taste, and there arises a desire in you that shows that there must be, you know, an intelligent agent guiding the action of the body. Even it might, you know, lead you to getting or procuring that mango. We are on page 200 on the right-hand side column. This is the last new paragraph. The intelligent agent is also inferred from, and we are looking at number 5. Number 6. Then again, from the qualities of pleasure, pain, desire, and aversion, and effort, we infer the existence of one to whom these qualities belong. These qualities cannot belong to the body or to the sense organs. Why? Because these are found to be coexistent with the notion of I, because these qualities exist only in certain parts of the object that they belong, because they are not coeval with their substratum. I'll just explain this in a minute. Because they are not perceptible by external objects. So they're thinking of mental properties. So mental properties like pleasure, pain, desire, and aversion, and effort, intention to do an action. All of this requires an agent. Why can't these properties belong to the body? Why can't we say it's the body that is doing the moving? Because, you know, we never say, when I say I am going to fetch a beer, the I does not refer to the body. It's not my body that's going to fetch the beer. That's the first point, because these are not found coexistent. with the notion of I, because the qualities exist only in certain parts of the object they belong to. We cannot say which part of the body does desire belong to. We can talk about pleasure and pain, but desire and aversion do not belong to a certain part of the body. You know, we can't say my foot desires a good shoe. You know, we don't go to the shop and, you know, look for a shoe that is desired by my foot. We look for a shoe that I desire, or a shoe that you desire. You don't look for, you know, parts of the body don't have desires. It's something else that has desires. That's the kind of argument they're trying to make. Another one, the last thing, number 7, the existence of the self as a distinct substance. So they want to say it's a distinct substance is also proved by the fact of its being spoken by means of the word I, which is wholly distinct from water, earth. Here you might think they're talking about, they're challenging the kind of Charvak view that the self is just a property of the 4 material substances, an emergent property of the 4 material substances. They want to say, no, the self cannot be a property of just the emergent substances, of the material elements, because we have a distinct word in our language, I, and the I does not refer to water, earth, fire, or anything. Now this is a peculiar claim. This is a peculiar claim, but the Nyayikas did hold this view that it's not discussed in the portion here. They had this view that every word denotes a particular thing that exists out there in the world. So every word in the language stands for something. They had this view, if you like, you know, and it's not a crazy view. It's a view that is discussed by many philosophers in the West as well. It's a view famously held by Russell, Bertrand Russell, and he also talked about, you know, language sort of captures the logical structure of the world. So to say, what exists in the world is spoken of in language. We'll talk, you know, if you like, in detail about this another time. But the point here is that the term I does not refer to any of the material elements. It must refer to a distinct substance. So they think the self is a distinct substance. It's not just merely a material element. You know, when you have a view as extreme, I won't say as mad, because I think it is a serious view as extreme as this, that every word in the language has something that, you know, it refers to, something out there in the world that it latches onto. It explains what monomer refers to. It explains, you know, what your names refer to. That's nice, but we might think, oh my gosh, this sounds like a bad assumption to make, because there are lots of words in the language that we might think does not refer to anything, that do not refer to anything. Can you give me some examples? Words that don't refer to anything. There's no real thing you want to postulate for that word to refer to. And good example, what about the logical, you know, connectives as they are called, and, or, if, then? All of them are logical connectives. They don't, you know, what does the and refer to in the world? Any suggestion? What might the world, what might be the thing in the world that and refers to? Relationship between things, you can say conjunction of two things, you know, and. That's what the Nyayas will say of anything. They will say, oh yes, this explains the word and refers to this relation between two things, or refers to a different kind of relation, if then refers to a different kind of relation. So they will get away with it. Any other word you can think of which refers to nothing? Good point. What about nothing? What does nothing refer to? Pardon?
That's fine. There's nothing in the universe.
There's nothing in the universe?
There's nothing.
There's nothing?
There's not. There's nothing in the universe. We can see places where, at least it seems to be nothing. So there's nothing in the space.
Yep. Black holes, there's nothing in the space. That's exactly the Nyaya move. They say absence is something that exists too. So when I leave this room, there is something here that you can perceive. You can perceive Monima when she's in this room, but you can also perceive the absence of Monima when she leaves this room. We can perceive the absence of things, and that's what nothing is. For them, absence is a real thing that exists in the world. Darkness. Darkness is not nothing for them. Darkness is the absence of light. Absence, according to them, is one of the real things that exists in the world. This is the logical consequence of having a view. Every word must refer to a unique thing in the world. Every word in the language must refer to a unique thing in the world, no matter what. And so they were forced to accept that absence is something you perceive. Why should you believe in absence? Because you actually perceive the absence of. You perceive the absence of PowerPoint slides on that screen. You not only perceive the blue screen, but you also perceive the absence of PowerPoint slides. You perceive the absence of Monima at 10 o'clock because she's always late. You perceive a lot of things that, you perceive a lot of absences. Yeah.
Most words refer to things in the world or possibilities.
Pardon?
Most words reference things that exist in the world.
Yeah.
Just possible things that could exist.
Yeah. There's two ways of thinking about, possible things that exist in the world. One way of making sense of possibilities is to say, it might have been the case. People often use this. It might have been the case that Monash was in the center of the city and Melbourne University was out in Clayton. It's perfectly possible. It might have been the case. If Monash was the first university to come up, we might have been in a better position than we are in. We have to take lots of trains and buses to eventually get here, right? So it's quite possible that it might have been the case that Monash was in a different place. When we talk in terms of possibilities, we don't postulate objects. We talk a different way things could be arranged. But, most talk of possibilities will talk of, the same things being different. Monima could have been taller, back to my old obsession of being tall. Monima could have been taller, right? But that's not postulating any new things. Possibilities don't postulate new things. Possibilities just postulate a different way things could have been. That's one way of thinking about possibilities. I'm not saying, you by now realize that philosophers think about all sorts of things. Who would have thought of language and absence being a real thing in the world? Philosophers do. There is plenty of stuff on the notion of possibility. One view is, and I'm telling you about this view because this is probably the Nyaya view. They don't want to say, they're realists about the world. This is the world that we live in is real. You and me are real, distinct, plural selves. Body is a property of the self. It's a real property of the self. It's not essential. Karmic residue is essential. Body is not essential, but they're properties of the self. All things, all things that exist, chairs are real for them. Persons are real for them. Individual persons are real. So that's the kind of guys they are. But they are going to say about possibilities, not, that you can postulate more things. But there are very famous, views in the philosophical literature. Again, a very famous philosopher who's had a huge influence on Australian philosophy called David Lewis had this view that there is our world and then there are other possible worlds. Right? So there can be other possible worlds in which different things exist, talks about counterparts, or a world in which, gods exist, or a world in which spirits exist and no humans exist, all kinds of worlds. How many worlds he postulated? infinite. Because once you start thinking about possibilities and you start postulating worlds, you'll have to have an infinite number. By the way, I said he was a very influential philosopher in Australian philosophy, but he was also what they called a mad dog realist. So if you start postulating things for possibilities, then there is no end at all. Lewis did, the Nyaya did not. That's the difference. But I just wanted to make the point clear that there are different views about this matter. It would take, you know, a whole degree studying possibilities. Yeah.
I thought you kind of have to, if you're going to accept that every word, because if I said like witches, and there's no witches in the world, but you could argue that maybe in a possible alternate world there could be witches. But if you're only open to this world, then you're not open to this world.
So, good point. Let's think about it. Witches, we think, do not exist. What are the Nyaya going to say? Charvakas say selves do not exist. What are the Nyaya going to say? You know, just think about this analogy for a minute. How do you think the Nyaya is going to answer that objection? They believe in the one real world. That's the world we live in. They don't believe in many possible worlds.
There are actually witches.
Yeah, they're going to say the fact that you have the word witch means there are actually some witches. The fact that you have, that was exactly the argument we were discussing. The fact that the word I is distinct, you know, is a separate word from water, earth, and fire, does not refer to any of these things. That's their reason that the self must exist as a distinct substance. So they're going to say, their response is going to be exactly this: witches exist. If you have the word witch in English, witches, it must exist somewhere in the world.
I guess every word that we have is just derived from something that we've seen. So
Yeah, so there's got to be some kind of relationship to the world. Yeah.
What if we come up with a word, like a square circle?
Square circles are impossibilities. Now, that would be a problem for Nyaya. Nyaya will say you're just conjuring up. There are two things. There are squares and there's a circle. You cannot combine impossible concepts. That's what you're doing, you know. The only thing that they would have to rule out is logical impossibilities. Logical impossibilities are always conjured up. Nothing, no particular word. And, you know, this might be a challenge for you guys to think about. You know, can you think of a particular word that refers to something that is logically impossible? I leave it at that and move on. I think it's a very fascinating, you know, idea to think about all words in the language refer to something or the other. You can't cook up a word. They're not conventionalists in the sense that language just came to be. You know, language has a very important role in play in our conceptual schemes, in the way we think about the world and about the way the world is configured. And this is a view that is held in the East and the West, you know, very seriously by philosophers, still held very seriously by philosophers. Okay, should we move on to the next argument? So intelligent agent first as the, you know, required intelligent agent as the thing that explains the movements of the body. One little thing, you know, just in support of their argument. So remember, we started off by breathing, winking, etc. These things, according to the Hindus, these things, how long you keep breathing, it's not accidental. The length of life is one of the things that is determined by our karmic residues. The quality of experiences you have is something that is determined by our karmic residues. So it's not completely out of character that they say that, you know, the fact that you're breathing means that there is an intelligent agent guiding this. So I've done the first argument from language on your handout. The other thing that they say is that you can actually have true statements using the word I. So for example, the statement, I'm here, very much Shankar's claim again. or I exist. Using the word statement, I exist, or I'm standing here, or I'm here, that's always a true statement. How do you get a true statement? True statement refers to things in the world being a certain way. You know, Monomer standing here, there's a fact that makes the statement true. They say there's lots of statements in the Vedas. Vedas, according to these guys, contain all the truths. They're infallible. Let's start with the word I. The only way to explain why a statement is true and another statement is false is by saying that that's the way things are. True statements show how things are in the world. So if I say I am here, that is true. An important puzzle with this, I am getting carried away, but can't hurt you. So I will think about this. What about this statement? Is it true or is it false? The present king of France is bald. The present king of France is bald. Important example used again by Bertrand Russell. What would you say of this statement? Is it true or is it false?
I didn't know France had a king.
Pardon?
I didn't know France had a king. If he's bold, I don't know.
You say you don't know whether it's true or false? Does someone know that France doesn't have a king? Yeah, France doesn't have a king. So the present king of France, what does this term refer to? What should we say of the sentence, the present king of France is bald? True, false? Neither true nor false, because the term does not refer to anything. The subject term must refer to a thing in the world. I am here is true because I refers to Monomer and she is here. You know, this chair is red is true because there's the chair I'm pointing to, the referent, has the property of being red. If I said the chair is blue, that would be false because there's a chair there that I'm pointing to. This chair is blue is false, right? And that's their claim. Statements, you know, your earlier examples of round squares. Round squares exist in heaven. It's neither true nor false. You know, that's one way of thinking about statement. But true statements, how do you explain a statement is true? Well, you have to postulate something in the world that the subject term refers to. And that's their reason for thinking about the term I. The Charvakas, and now we move on to the second of these claims. The Charvakas throw this challenge at the Nyaya. Why can't the I refer to this body? Why do you have to say there is something deeper hidden? Why can't the I just refer to the body? Good argument. Can the I refer to the body? Each individual body is referred to by I. I just refers to the physical structure that there is. I'll read you. Yeah?
From what you said earlier, there's sentences where you can swap out the word I with my body, but there is sentences where you can't swap out the word I with my body. So you can't say, like, I don't know, my body is going to get that.
Beer.
Yeah,
My body is going to get the beer.
you can say I'm stronger than you, and you can say my body is stronger than you, but they're referring to one.
Yeah.
When you say, I want a beer, you can't say my body is something because you don't probably what's here.
Yeah. So I think about beer as something that quenches thirst. And can you say, you know, there's a physical state that wants that beer? Yeah? I think about it's an interesting point. Can we make some claims that we cannot really substitute the term my body for I? There's a way of thinking, you know, Charvakas, I think, will agree with that there is a way of thinking that we can think about every statement that we make with I can be replaced by, if I say I'm in pain, well, it's either the foot or a headache or a stomach ache or something like that. If I say I want to, you know, there's a state in the body, probably a complex state in the body, which is the state of being thirsty, which has the desire of being quenched when I want a beer. Anything else that people can think of? that will resist a term that will resist being explained in terms of body, my body?
I desire happiness. Very good.
I desire happiness. Can we think of, bodily state? How would the body be happy? Pardon?
Endorphins, serotonin.
There you go.
Physical experience.
The physical happiness is just a brain state, right? I'm talking like a materialist. Anything that you try to do, materialists will give you, go and get a chill pill, as they say. That'll fix it. Whatever your favorite chill pill is, I don't want to say, it has to be endorphins or whatever, but whatever your favorite chill pill is, that'll make you happy. Go and have that. That's what it means to say, I desire happiness. Go and fulfill it. So the Nyayikas have to come up with a very sophisticated argument against this claim. They can't just say there are states of, anything that they try and say with the eye, the Charvakas can always throw back, like we were doing here, and explain it in terms of, my body. But they have a nice argument, and you can tell me what you think of it. This is on page 201. I'm sorry I go all over the place in the text to get some kind of, structure in the lecture. This is on the right-hand side column of page 201. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth paragraph. Not for the above reasons alone, blah, blah, blah. So halfway through the middle of that paragraph, you will see the notion of I could not refer to the body. Fourth new paragraph on page 200, right-hand side column. And let me read exactly the argument, and then you tell me what the argument is first, and then whether it's a good one. So they say the notion of I could not refer to the body because it is not found to apply to the body of another person. Nor could it be said to apply to one's own body alone. If the notion of I referred to the body, then just as another man's body being as perceptible as our own body, the notion of fatness appearing equally with reference to both, the other man's body would also be capable of being spoken as I, especially as in both the shape is the same. Then again, if the I referred to the body, it could not appear to our consciousness as something internal. Anyone figured out what the argument is? Not very clear as usual. The point here is this, at least, this is how I have thought about it. What they're saying is we all must agree that the term I uniquely refers to the individual. Uniquely is important here. It uniquely refers to, it uniquely picks out the individual who is using the word I. When I use I in my mouth, it refers to me. When you use I, that it refers to you, right? I can't refer to the body because they say, what is the essential property of the body? It's its shape. But there could be something, that has exactly the same shape as my body. There could be a statue here, which has exactly the same shape as my body, or there could be a twin. I could have a twin which is exactly the same shape as me. Two identical twins have exactly the same body. In fact, you can take it further and think about twins that are physical and psychological duplicates of you. They think the same, they say the same, they feel the same. There's lots of twin studies. If you've had any interest in the notion of twins, there's a lot of studies on twins. They say they respond the same. The way they respond to the world, they respond the same. But still, when I use the word I, it does not refer to my twin sitting right next to me. Why does it refer to me? Any property of the body, in fact, any physical property. You can generalize this. Any physical property, any mental property can be duplicated and had by this thing, my twin, who is sitting right next to me. But still, the word I can't refer to them. It can only refer to me. So the word I must refer to something other than physical stuff, something other than, mere mental properties. It has to refer to something deeper. Right? They say I cannot just refer to the body because there is no way. Let me just say the argument more clearly, or let me try to say it more clearly, and then we'll discuss the objection. So the point is this: the term I uniquely picks out this person, but the term I cannot uniquely pick out just a body. It does not uniquely pick out this body because it's possible that there are other bodies. It's possible that there are other bodies that have exactly the same shape. There are other twins that have exactly the same shape. So we cannot distinguish between me and my twin on the basis of physical properties alone. Therefore, we must say that the term I must refer to something other than the physical body, because whatever the referent of the term I is, it must be unique to me.
So this is an argument for the existence of the self apart from body. So
Yeah.
saying that if I had a doppelganger exactly the same as me, thinks the same like everything. When I say I'm talking about my soul.
That's right. It's the issue about individuality. That's why, they're starting with individual souls. That's very important to them, that each of us is an individual soul. It's a particular soul. Even when we are free, even as liberated, we exist as individuals.
Put this to you, it's a thought experiment. If I was to travel back in time and the person who's my doppelganger was in fact me from the future, we have the same soul. But I said I and I refer to me still.
The Nyayikas, time travel objection, two eyes in the same room, right? The Nyayikas at that point, are just going to deny that time travel is a possibility. For them, time is circular. You're always moving ahead, but in this circular way. Can't go back and tell your earlier self things. So there can't be two eyes in the room. There can only be one eye, according to them, existing. Yeah. Any other objections now? Do people understand the argument? I cannot refer to the physical stuff because I refers to a unique individual, and uniqueness cannot be guaranteed by physical stuff. Yeah.
I think it's a good argument. I think it does disprove that I is the body as in just a physical part of the human body, so you can practically recreate that. But it doesn't mean that there is also in this itself. You know those connections. You could say, well, sure, maybe probably include the body, but I is still this way because I have experience in this body. I don't feel in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's identical to mine, my consciousness is tied to this body, or my memories are tied to this body.
And I mean, that's exactly what they're saying. That's exactly what they're saying. This is internal to this body, whatever it is. And the very last point that I read there, because the argument was so confusing, it probably did not come out. This is exactly their statement at the very end. Then again, the notion of I referred to the body. It could not appear in our consciousness as something internal. It is something internal to this body, my experiences. That's exactly the notion they want to capture. And they say this belongs, yes, it is particularly tied to your body, and your doppelganger or your twin does not have that. So they're going to say, yes, it's a good thing. So I cannot refer, I must be referring to this unique consciousness. I is not referring just to the body. That's their claim. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a soul. Sure, but it says there's something internal that it has to refer. Something, something that cannot just be the body. Is that a big win over the Charvaks? No? Yeah, why not?
It's trivial, but even still have different fingerprints. They're not identical. So you can say, oh, these two things are the same, therefore, they can't say I and refer to the other one, but they only seem identical. They're not. You won't actually have these two things. They may look the same, sound the same, and have the same reactions, but at the end of the day, they're not the same. They don't have the same thing.
They can't.
Identical things don't exist.
Identical things don't.
You take that to the extreme if you go, it's my doppelganger, saying life, saying everything.
You know,
You say, you still refer to yourself.
have you seen those sitcoms or something, TV things, where there's someone creates a duplicate of you, and who's the real I? Each says, it's me, it's me. And give me this. I take your point. I take your point that, twins are not identical. You're quite right about that. But give me this. There is a possibility of creating an exact duplicate.
Then maybe we should be saying that if the I is the body, then the body is not only a spatial thing. It's not only it's like spatial and temporal, and so even if there's an exact copy of me here,
Yeah.
I'm saying I because I'm here. We can't exist in the same place at the same
Yeah.
time.
Exactly. That's, yeah.
If I move and
Yeah.
the other thing sits here, I'm not there anymore. We are different.
Yeah. Very good point. Yes, the I can't refer to the body even if there's a duplicate next to you, but that does not. And this is the point, that was made earlier, but that does not show that the I must refer to the soul. Because what's the way of distinguishing me and my twin? Exactly the argument you give. Think about our relational properties. My twin is to the left of me. My duplicate, right. I told you I had a cold, and I told you to tell me when I went incoherent. I just pointed here and said to the left of me. My twin on the right is, lost the thought. My twin on the right is an exact duplicate, but the twin is not here. It has distinct spatio-temporal properties. It occupies a distinct space. Well, right now it exists in the same time as me, but next week it might not come to the lecture. It might have gone out of existence. It might have died in the meantime, or it might have gone to the next life, or however you want to think about it. So my twin and I, there are ways of distinguishing. Or forget the twins, because I think there is an empirical problem with twins. My duplicate and I are distinct because we have distinct spatio-temporal properties. So even though on the face of it, it seems a very strong argument, and you must give this to the Naiyayikas, I think. Hats off for coming up with this kind of an argument. It's very difficult to distinguish two individuals on the basis of their physical properties alone. But they forgot there are other ways of distinguishing, which Charvaks have no problem with. They will just refer to what is called the relational properties or the spatio-temporal properties or something else. There are other properties you can point to. We do not need a soul. We do not need to postulate a soul to explain why the term I, even if we grant to them, we grant to the Charvaks we grant to the Naiyayikas that the term I must refer to a unique individual. The unique individual need not be a separate soul substance, separate from the body, because it might just be a relational property of this body. And that the Charvaks will have no problem with. Okay, so I'll quickly talk about the next two arguments. There is not much new in those arguments. This is some of the things we've talked about before, and then we'll move to the argument from memory, which I think is very exciting, and the argument of memory is also the topic for next week's lecture, but you have sort of, we're going to go beyond the Naiyayikas and look at the Buddhist objection to the argument from memory, and then a reply by a different Hindu school to the Buddhists. So we'll sort of stay on the question of memory for a while. It's a very important point of debate between the Hindus and the Buddhists. And so it will grab our attention for a while. So let me say something about the other two arguments I have on the handout. The argument for the self as the substratum of mental qualities, and the argument for self as the substratum of conscious properties. So about the first, the Nyayikas have this to say, and you get this analogy in the text. Cognitions of sound, color, pleasure, pain, desires are qualities, and they must belong to a substance. These things cannot belong to the body or the senses or even to the mind. So desire, pleasure, pain, etc. cannot belong to the... one of the reasons why they say desire cannot belong to the mind, and this is important, is because they think that the mind, for the Nyayikas, for the Hindus in general, the mind, as I said, is not the self. The mind for them is just an internal organ. Just like you have, the five senses, the eyes, ears, nose, touch. What's the fifth sense? Taste. Yes, you have the five senses for sensing external things, things that are external to my body. You also have a mind, which is an instrument for sensing internal states. Internal states of the body, pain, pleasure, desire, needs an instrument as well. So the Nyaya conception of the mind is just that it is an instrument for perceiving the internal states of the body. It's not, it's not the way we think about the mind. It's just like an internal organ. They often refer to the mind as an internal organ, and so the Nyayikas will say these properties cannot belong to external organs or to internal organs. The microscope is something, they say the mind is like a microscope. It is a microscope to see the internal states of the body. Otherwise, how would we sense the internal states of the body? Just like the outer senses, we need an internal sense. The mind just has that function. It does not, so it cannot possess these properties. The microscope, so the notion here of the self is the notion of a seer. We can't say the microscope sees. The microscope is an instrument. Similarly, they say the mind is an instrument used for sensing internal states, and therefore we cannot say these states belong to the mind. The next one, argument for the self as the subject of conscious experiences. I want to draw your attention very quickly to a bit of text here, just so that you get a sense of why they say consciousness cannot belong to the body, cannot belong to the sense organs, and cannot belong to the mind, and see if you find these arguments convincing. So in the cognitions of sound, etc., page 200, right at the bottom, last paragraph, left-hand side column. In the cognitions of sound, etc., also we infer a cognizer. This character, so this property cannot belong to the body or to the sense organs or to the mind, because all these are unintelligent or unconscious. Consciousness cannot belong to the body, as the body is just a material product like the jar, and also no consciousness is found in dead bodies. Consciousness cannot be a property of the body. Why? Because consciousness cannot be found in dead bodies. Remember? Same argument like last time. That's just what they're going to say. Consciousness has to be a property of something else, can't just be a property of the body, because the body is there at death, but there is no consciousness. Again, we might have the same kind of criticism that we had of Shankar last time and say, no, that's not a good argument because the body is disintegrating. The body is not all there at death. But second one, so nor can consciousness belong to the sense organs. Why not? Because these are mere instruments, and because we have remembrance of objects even after the sense organ has been destroyed. So someone who loses their eyesight in an accident can still have the memory, who cannot see at all, can still have the memory of a visual perception. The memory, insofar as memory is a conscious state, you can have conscious states, you can remember that experience even though the sense organ has been destroyed. That means memory can't just be a property of the sense organs because memories remain. Or just simply they say, you can have experiences even when, you're not, the sense organ is not in contact with the object. I can just close my eyes and imagine a mango. And, I have a visual image as of a mango even though there's no mangoes around. So imagination, memories, etc. are proof that insofar as they're conscious states, they are proof that consciousness cannot be a property of the self. Any responses to that? This is a new argument. It's not just like the Charvak argument.
No, it's a good one. I like imagination being said can't be property of human organs because you haven't seen those.
Good argument. Cannot be property of, we've dismissed body, we've dismissed sense organs. Let's see if we can dismiss the mind. Nor can it belong to the mind, because if the mind be regarded as functioning independently of the other organs, so if we thought that the mind was separate from the organs, then we would have perception and remembrance simultaneously presenting themselves. And if the mind were regarded as functioning through the other organs, then it would be the same as the self, and also the mind itself is a mere instrument. So there's quite a few arguments. One, they rehearse, the easiest is they rehearse that same argument, mind is just an instrument. It can't be. The other one is maybe, what you call the mind is what we call, what you call the mind is what we call the self. So the mind is something that actually does the job of synthesizing the various perceptions. But the most interesting argument, here is that if consciousness belongs to the mind, they say, then we would have seeing something and remembering something simultaneously. Is that right? Good question. I have trouble figuring out what does that mean myself. So what would it mean to have seeing something and remembering it at the same time? Can you have that experience? Can you think of seeing something and remembering? It doesn't make sense. Yes, something like that I think is what they would have in mind, déjà vu. And that's exactly the point, that if the mind is functioning independently of the organs, so you see something and you recollect it at the same, it feels like a repeat of the same thing. And they say déjà vu experiences independent, then we would have perception. That would be a bad thing, having experiences like that. Yeah.
No. I was going to say, it's remembering, not it's not the same as retaining.
No, not just retaining, seeing and remembering simultaneously. So they're thinking that déjà vu experiences would be a problem. And the reason why they say that is a problem, I think, and I'm making this up, so I think the reason why they say that would be a problem is because they think that you're not remembering at the same time. These must be, like two distinct experiences which happen in such quick succession that you confuse them. You can't be perceiving and remembering at the same time.
So they're saying that because we don't do that, the mind is not the same as the Atma.
Yeah, the self or the soul. Yeah, it is the point. I think the point here is about synthesizing cognitions. So mind, insofar as it gives you certain kinds, it's the faculty for certain kinds of Cognitions cannot be the self, because the self is something that synthesizes cognitions, and sometimes synthesis is required. As in memory, synthesis is required. You see something now, something you're seeing now triggers an earlier cognition, and the memory is a result of a synthesis of those two things. So think of the self as something. It's a huge problem for the Buddhists to explain this memory, because they don't have the notion of self persisting over time. So it cannot play the role of a synthesizer. Cannot play the role of a synthesizer. So think that, I think the main reason for distinguishing the self and the mind is that the Nyayikas think of the self as the synthesizer, and the mind cannot do the role of synthesis. One last argument. I know I have very few minutes left. Argument from memory. I'm just going to throw it out and let you think about it. I'm not going to discuss it today. Just so that we grasp it today, we can think about it a whole week, and we'll come back to it next week. So again, it's an inference to the best explanation. What's the phenomena that is being explained? The phenomena that is being explained here is desires. So we have desires for objects that have been experienced in the past as being pleasurable. So if you have desire for food, I know it's getting about lunchtime now, so the desire for food after the Indian philosophy lecture, the food, having something to eat after the Indian philosophy lecture is something you've enjoyed before, and that's why you have the desire to want that thing again. Premise one, everyone okay with it on the handout? We have desires. Some of our desires are for objects that we have experienced as being pleasurable in the past. Premise two, that's the thing that needs explanation, okay? Premise two, one can't desire things that one cannot remember. That's one thing. And two, one cannot remember someone else's experiences. I can't desire something that I don't remember, and I cannot remember your experiences. Memory is a success term. If it's only I'm remembering myself doing something in the past, then it's a memory. Otherwise, I'm misremembering. That's what we say. The second part of the second premise is fine too. What about the first part? One can't desire things that one cannot remember. Dodgy. Okay, we'll note that. But these two premises, they think, show that therefore there must be a continuously existing self that had those pleasurable experiences in the past and desires them now. So they think, this is, if you like, an argument for a continuously existing self against the Buddhists. They say there must be something that continues to exist over time, because we have to explain desire. How do we explain? Desire is something we all have. How do we explain that? We explain that by postulating the self, because we need something to exist continuously over time for us to have desires, because we only have desires for things that we experience as pleasurable. We cannot desire things we haven't experienced in the past, and we cannot remember someone else's experiences. I'll leave that with you to think about, even though we have 4 minutes. I think I cannot think anymore, to be honest. So I'll leave it at that, and think about this argument. We'll begin with the argument from memory and your objections to it next week, and see you then. Thank you.